So, what if the biggest events of the last 500 years weren't random at all? What if they were all part of a secret, meticulously planned war against all of us? Today, we're going to dive deep into the central claims of a really radical book that proposes exactly that. Okay, so where are we getting all this from? The source for today's breakdown is this nearly 500-page book by Mewis T. Bayan. In English, the title is The Predators versus the People. Now, just to be super clear, our goal here isn't to prove or disprove any of this. We're just going to neutrally unpack the core arguments of this really dense and, let's face it, controversial text, using its own material to guide us. The book kicks things off by citing Voltaire. And this quote, man, it really sets the stage perfectly. The author's whole idea is built on challenging the official story of history. You know, the one we all learned in school. It suggests that what we've been taught is just a cover for something much, much deeper. So here's how we're going to tackle this. We're going to follow the book's own logic. First, we'll explore the main idea of this secret war. Then, we'll unpack what it calls the Predator's Playbook. After that, we'll see how this completely changes the view on major historical events, look at what the author calls the endgame, and finally, check out the proposed solution, something called a free set. All right, let's dive right into the deep end. What is this secret war all about? This is the foundational claim of the entire book. Okay, so here's the central argument in a nutshell. All the big world events, we're talking wars, financial crashes, you name it, they aren't random. The author suggests they are all orchestrated steps in a very long-term plan for total global control, waged by a hidden group he calls the Predators. And this group has a name in the book, Glafia. This is a super important term to remember. Think of it as shorthand for a global mafia or a criminal oligarchy that, according to the text, operates completely behind the scenes, above nations. So throughout the book, whenever you hear predators or Glafia, they're talking about the same thing. So, if a group like this actually exists, how in the world would they operate? How would they pull it off? Well, the book answers that by laying out what it calls the Predator's Playbook, the specific tactics they allegedly use to control everything. Now, what's really fascinating here is the strategy it lays out. It's not about tanks and armies. The book claims their power comes from controlling money, first and foremost. It's about deception, not force. And get this, staging crises, what it calls protection frauds, where they secretly create a problem and then publicly offer the solution. On top of that, they allegedly control politicians from the shadows and use big ideas and ideologies to disconnect us from our own nature. And to hammer this point home, the book uses quotes like this one from Henry Kissinger. The idea here is absolutely crucial. Financial control is the ultimate lever of power. If you control the money supply, you can basically steer the fate of entire nations without ever having to fire a shot. The author then breaks this whole 500-year plan down into two main stages. Phase 1 was all about geography, controlling the land. This was supposedly done through colonization and then by blowing up Eurasia with manufactured world wars. Phase 2, which the book says we're in right now, is all about controlling people, a total shift to ideological and now technological surveillance, what it calls a global digital prison. Okay, so this is where the rubber meets the road. How does looking at history through this unique lens actually change our understanding of the last 100 years or so? This timeline really illustrates that reinterpretation. So creating the Fed in 1913, the book says that wasn't for economic stability. It was to create a money machine to fund future wars. World War I wasn't an accident. It was a plan to shatter the old empires. The Cold War is framed as one giant protection fraud to keep the military-industrial complex well-fed. And then 9/11 is described as the grand overture for the final act, the War on Terror, which kicks off Phase 2. And to show that this isn't some brand new idea, the book pulls out quotes like this one from Abraham Lincoln. This is used to argue that powerful people have been warning about a hidden money power trying to take over for a very, very long time. And all of that brings us right up to the present day, to what the author claims is the final phase of this 500-year plan, the end game. The book really hones in on things we're all hearing about right now, like the World Economic Forum's Great Reset. It argues this isn't just some boring policy proposal. It's the public brand for the endgame. And that forces us to ask, is this a plan for progress
Or is it the blueprint for a global prison?
This slide just lays it out so clearly. The contrast is, wow. Where the WEF talks about a fourth industrial revolution, the author sees dehumanism. What they call stakeholder capitalism, the book interprets as digistopian slave communism. And that famous line, "You'll own nothing and be happy," well, that's seen as the marketing slogan for a global cattle farm where humans are managed, not free. So, how is this endgame supposedly being rolled out? The book points to 5 key things it calls the modern horseman. For instance, it frames the push for central bank digital currencies not as an innovation, but as a tool for total surveillance and control through programmable money. The pandemic, Agenda 2030, the rise of BRICS, the climate narrative, they're all presented not as separate issues, but as coordinated tools for global control. And the engine driving all of this? According to the book, it's debt. By 2020, global debt had hit an absolutely mind-boggling $350 trillion, an unpayable number. And it's presented as the ultimate control mechanism, basically debt slavery on a planetary scale. Okay, so after all of that doom and gloom, you might be thinking, is there any hope here? Well, the book doesn't just end in despair. It actually proposes a solution, something it calls the Great Reset. Let's see what that's all about. And here's where things take a really interesting turn. The author argues that this war against us isn't just political or economic, it's fundamentally spiritual. The text actually calls the Enlightenment a form of obscurantism, a fancy way of saying it was a program designed to cut us off from nature, from the universe, and from our own inner power. So the solution can't be political either. And that leads to this idea of the Great Reset. It's set up as the direct opposite of the Great Reset. It's not a 10-point political plan. It's a call for a massive spiritual reawakening, both for us as individuals and as a whole. The idea is that by reconnecting with nature and the universe, we can reclaim our own power and, in doing so, become impossible for the predators to control. And so, at the end of the day, this whole breakdown leaves us with the massive question that the book poses. Whether you think this is a compelling alternative way of looking at history or just one giant conspiracy theory, it forces you to ask the question, is the world we live in shaped by random accidents and chaos? Or is it possible we're all living in a script written a long, long time ago by some unseen hand?